What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the early read. Getting this out a little bit later than usual. Mets playoff game on Wednesday. Decided to watch that. Shout out Francisco Lindor, team of destiny. But we still got plenty of college football to get into. So going to do our usual little injury roundup, few ads, player props, underdog round robin, and get you out of here in hopefully about a half hour. So let's start really quick. It's also probably better to record these later on Wednesday because the SEC drops their injury reports Wednesday nights, which obviously gives good insight into who's going to play and who's not. And, it would help when I do these injury roundups. Where are the state of some of obviously the more pivotal games on the slate? So there's a bunch of names on these. I'm not going to go through every single one, just a few that stand out that I think could maybe be impactful and are worth monitoring on game day. See who's warming up, follow those beat reporters on Saturday afternoon and such Saturday night, and see where you can find maybe some of these key players aren't playing, and that could potentially be spread impactors, or maybe you could get ahead of something. So a few to key in on. Ole Miss went deep on this game with Nick on Monday. And as expected, a lot of guys are on this injury report, including Trey Harris and Princely. Not even going to try and say his last name, Numanua Apua. They're both questionable. I imagine Trey Harris is going to go. I don't know about Princely, though. We'll see. Offensive line injuries still are around as I pull up their injury report right now. But this Ole Miss team is going to be limping in to this game 100%. LSU, though, on the other side, coming out of their bye week, still a few injury notes here. CJ Daniels, the Liberty transfer, he is still banged up with he's going to be questionable for this one. But Caden Durham, who was hurt in the South Alabama game, he's probable, the freshman running back that I think is their best option. He is probable, so he's likely, I imagine, going to go. So LSU, maybe not as healthy as you hope. CJ Daniels, guy is a starter. He is on the field. He has at least 6 targets in more than half the games this season. So definitely a bit of an issue there for the LSU passing game, but they're going to have Kyron Lacey. They're going to have Garrett Nussmeier, and this LSU team is going to be, or this Ole Miss team is going to be limping in to this game for sure. We go now to Tennessee, Florida really quick. Dante Thornton, he is questionable for this one. Squirrel wide receiver, Squirrel Wright, and Brew McCoy are both probable. So questions in the Tennessee passing game, obviously off the loss. They're going to play a Florida team that's had a ton of injury issues, and they're probably getting a healthier Florida team, though. Eugene Wilson, Aiden Mizell, they're both not on the initial injury reports. So the expectation is that they're going to be able to go. Wilson's missed the last few. And starting left tackle, Austin Barber, he's questionable for the Gators. So is this maybe a dark cloud over Tennessee now off the loss to Arkansas? We'll see. They're a little banged up heading into this one. Red River, as expected, Quinn Ewers probable. He's going to be back for this one. Ewers cooked. I spoke about this with Nick on the early week show. Ewers cooked in that game. Just a few bad bounces against him really turned that game against them. Texas probably should have won that game against Oklahoma. OU coming out of their bye week, it's not going to get any easier for them. Farouk, Gibson, Anderson, Andrel Anthony, all wide receivers, they're all out. Deion Burks, their best one, League Burks, he's questionable, so we'll see if maybe they can have a little bit of a boost to help Michael Hawkins out. Offensive line injuries, that's going to continue as well. We're going to see how they're going to go. I think they're going to try and deploy Hawkins as a rush threat, try and play keep away, try and shrink this game down to as few possessions as possible. Maybe Venables could turn up the turnover machine a little bit more to get out of this one, but it's going to be tough sledding for the OU offense, that's for sure. One more really quick on the SEC stuff. Vanderbilt going to be limping into their game against Kentucky, a suddenly much more exciting game against the Wildcats. Vandy off the win, obviously. Safety CJ Taylor, he's questionable for this one. There's also both starting linebackers are questionable, Longwell and Patterson. So this Vandy defense which has been pretty solid. I don't think Kentucky could do much in reality, but Vandy's defense might be limping in to this one. Few other injury notes that I am looking for as we get ready for week 7. We got UCLA, Ethan Garber's practice ahead of the Minnesota game. We'll see if he goes. Justin Martin started against Penn State. TBD. I think Garber's is obviously an upgrade. I wouldn't say it's so much. That game against Minnesota, we're going to talk about in a little bit. We'll see if Garber's could go. Maybe got the week off against Penn State with an eye on actually trying to compete and win this one. UCLA about a 5-point underdog in this one. Other one that I want to mention, I'm just going to go in rotation order now. Friday night, Utah, Arizona State. Spoke about it with Nick. Is Cam Rising going to go? The age-old question. Not worth really stressing about at this point just because it's been happening for so long. But it's looking like Rising not going to go. There are player props out for Isaac Wilson, and I'm not going to say that that's gospel, and you should take that as that is the end-all, be-all, because it's just they're putting out some bets that can be made. But it's TBD if Rising is going to go, and they're putting out player props, and he hasn't played now in 3 games. Coming out of a bye week, I feel like it would have been more clear if he was going to play. So market moved hard on Arizona State. We were talking about taking Arizona State anyway, even if Rising was going to go. Obviously, he doesn't go. I think that this should be closer to, I don't know, Arizona State favored potentially, given what we've seen from Utah's offense. So it's looking like Utah is currently a 4.5-point favorite. It went from a Rising's in number to a Rising might not be in, and there's one more move to make if Rising is actually out. So keep an eye on that. That's a Friday night game, the late game out in Tempe. Cal Pitt, Jaden Ott landed on the injury report. He's probable with, I think it was deemed general soreness, so he's probably going to go. Worth keeping an eye on. He's been banged up all year. Maybe he's a little bit limited as they travel cross country to play Pitt. Mendoza, obviously everyone's talking about that targeting call if you were up at 2 a.m. on the East Coast like I was. He got popped in that one. Maybe he was milking it for trying to draw the call. They did a review and it didn't end up working, but I'm interested to see what Mendoza is like. He's not on the injury report with a concussion or anything, nothing about protocol. Just one that I'm keeping an eye on because he got popped a few times in that game. Donovan Green for Wake Forest. He's out, top wide receiver. Playing a Clemson team, they're a huge underdog. I don't know if Wake's going to be able to move the ball so much. Pretty high total. But I'm interested to see when player props drop. Horatio Fields, however you say it. I'm interested to see what his player prop comes at. It was in the mid-30s, 40s last week against NC State. And I know Clemson is a wagon on the defensive side of the ball. But Fields has seemed to be the biggest benefactor of Donovan Green being phased out or not playing at all, really. But against NC State, 4 catches, 46 yards. The week prior to that, 6 catches, 81 yards. And prior to that, 4 for 60. So his role has been he's been into those 50s. The median outcome appears to be in like the higher 50s. So he's someone to keep an eye on. I believe we're going to get player props for that one, given hosting Clemson noon kickoff. So interested to see that one. Have not seen word on Corey Kiner out of the bye week. Cincinnati running back. He got banged up against Texas Tech prior to the bye week 2 weeks ago. Let's do a quick search and see if there's anything that pops up. Don't see any news about Kiner. So one to keep an eye on against UCF. Also weather, obviously, with the hurricane down there. So definitely there's some injury notes coming out of UCF Cincinnati that I think are worth monitoring. And now that I search on Twitter, I don't know how reliable it is, but it seems like Kiner might be able to go. Definitely one to keep an eye on. Other ones that I am looking for, Purdue, Illinois. If you look at an odds grid, you saw Illinois got hammered into oblivion on Wednesday afternoon, went from 18, someone bet it down to 17 really fast, and it got smacked right back in their face, and now it's up at 23. Maybe it's a mutiny. Maybe it's quarterback news. If it's not Hudson Card, it's going to be Ryan Brown. Illinois out of a bye. Purdue is maybe the worst Power 4 team in the country. I think you can put that up there for grabs. So Illinois might be set to roll there, but you're kind of late to the party in terms of getting a relatively good number on Illinois, unless you think Ryan Brown can't throw a forward pass. Then I guess you're good there. Fresno State, Washington State, and this is I'll just give out the handicap now. I bet Fresno State. Expectation was that they were getting healthier out of the bye week ahead of their matchup against Washington State. I bet Fresno State this morning, so that's another bet. I think you look at where the state of this team is. They closed inside of a field goal against UNLV, and I know they got absolutely trounced by the Rebs, and sure, that could happen again. But you're back at home, both teams out of a bye week. I'm a little bit more towards this Fresno team has more on the defensive side of the ball, especially. Mikey Keene struggling with turnovers, but this Washington State team isn't going to really pressure the ball or really put you in harm's way whatsoever. The team can't tackle for anything. They are checking in at the lowest tackling grade in the entire country, according to Pro Football Focus. Pass rush grade, second worst to Akron, who isn't really elite company. Pass rush grade, team checks in right around the national average. I just don't know if you're really going to see much here. Meanwhile, the Fresno State defensive line is actually held up pretty nicely. I would say their numbers are down. They're only 75th in pass rush grade, but their schedule is fairly more difficult, in my opinion. I think Fresno State, off the bye week, they're getting healthier. They had injuries on the offensive line, and Malik Sherrod has been banged up. Overall, you look at where these teams stand, net EPA per play, Washington State 74th, Fresno State 76th. These two teams are much more equal than you'd think. And I don't trust Washington State to go on the road and get margin on a team. You look at where they've thrived, it's been more in that underdog role. San Jose State, they were down 21 in that game, and they had to rally to win that game in overtime as a 2-touchdown favorite. Now you're laying points on the road. This Washington State team really is nothing to call home about, especially on the defense side of the ball. I think Fresno State can really come out with a sound game plan and get this one done. I hope a healthier Malik Sherrod could jumpstart that rushing game. That's 122nd EPA per rush, but getting over a field goal here, this one looks like a last team has the ball type situation. So there's some injury notes on Fresno State and also bet there. Did Ole Miss LSU, did Texas Oklahoma, and USC Penn State. Linebacker Eric Gentry might not play the rest of the year with concussions. Definitely one to keep an eye on. He's been arguably their best player on the defensive side of the ball for USC. So I think it's definitely a huge concern as we move into the later part of the season. USC obviously body blows on this roster. Are they going to be able to hold up in this Big Ten schedule? The schedule does not get any easier, I would say. A lot of cross-country travel. Somebody's honking a horn. But I think USC has some big concerns on the defensive side of the ball as we move forward into this season. USC hosts Penn State. If you want a deeper dive into that game, spoke about it with Nick on the early week show. Going to talk some player props about it in just a few minutes. So before we move into the player props, which have been super profitable, super great at the start of the season, let me tell you about our sponsor for today's show, and that is Rithmm. Rithmm is an AI-generated sports modeling app that lets you get in on the sports betting action with a few clicks of the button. If you have different thoughts, different ideas that you think could be applied to sports betting, Rithmm can help get you a generated point spread and total just by clicking a few buttons. I use my pressure run model. It is 34, 18, and 1 on totals this season. That's a 24.9% ROI. They have hundreds of different inputs with different weights that lets you make your own sports betting model. They also have their own their own Rithmm AI generated model that churns out winning bets on a weekly basis. If you want to sign up for Rithmm today, make sure you use the link in the podcast description below. Get started with Rithmm today and have fun winning this football season. All right, so let's talk some player props for this weekend. Still trickling out. There's more options this week relative to the other weeks, but relative to last week, because there was kind of a slow trickle out. But there's a few in here that we could talk about that are still good and that I bet. So let's start first. Big game, Colorado, Kansas State. Shedeur Sanders over 310.5 passing yards. Kansas State's pass rush is shockingly bad. And you'd think, given how the schedule's really panned out for them, they have the one loss against BYU, but that was more turnover driven than anything. You'd think, oh, Kansas State, the defense looks pretty sturdy this year. No, that's not the case. Kansas State's bottom 10 in pass rush grade, according to Pro Football Focus, bottom half of the country in EPA per pass. And that's exactly where Colorado wants to attack you. 6th in pass play percentage. We know Shedeur, this offense, they want to pass the ball 40 plus times. Going to be a competitive game. Colorado's taking money this morning. They're about a 3.5 point underdog now. Going to be a competitive game. Going to be what I think is a relatively higher scoring game. I think Shedeur, 310.5 passing yards. This is right around his season-long average. So this isn't even expecting a plus matchup here. This is expecting more of a median outcome. Shedeur's gone over this. He's gone, including 310. He's gone to that in 3 of 5. 290 in the other one, and 244 against a Nebraska team on the road, which has a much better pass rush. So I think he's going to have time. I think he's going to be able to sit back, and I think Shedeur could get over 310.5 passing yards. Iowa State, West Virginia, talked about the over in that game, and so I think you could maybe have an idea of where I'm looking in terms of player props in this one. Garrett Green, over rushing yards, over 55.5. Over in 3 of 5, 49 the other one. Then the other one was Penn State, which has a much, in my opinion, sturdy pass rush. I don't know how good this Iowa State defense is. They haven't played anyone with a pulse just yet on offense, and especially haven't faced a mobile quarterback, especially one of Garrett Green's nature this season. Watched the Baylor game last week. Sawyer Robertson, only 3 carries for about 24 yards. He had some plays where he could have taken off. There were a couple 4th downs where he flicked it downfield. Could have ran for 6-7 yards. Could have picked up few more chunk plays. But Garrett Green wants to run. You go back to last year even, 100-yard rushing days. This guy wants to run around and make plays with his legs. Iowa State, I mentioned I have some current concerns about the defense. How about outside the top 100 in pass rush and tackling? Shaky look here going on the road to a liquored up Morgantown at night. We'll see how that goes. But I think Garrett Green can make some plays. Worth noting, did get dinged up against Oklahoma State, left the game for a few drives, came back in, didn't really seem all that hampered. So haven't seen much on it. Not super concerned. Green went over last week. We bet that last week. Think we're good here. Garrett Green over 55.5 rushing yards. This is this is where it was last week, and it didn't go up. And last week he broke into, I believe it was the 70s. In terms of rushing yards. He went way over. So it's not adjusting. So let's just keep hammering it here. Green last week, he ran for 10 carries, 86 yards. I know that this Iowa State defense has a high reputation, lofty reputation, but I'm going against that. On the other side, though, Rocco Becht over passing yards, anywhere below 250 are good. I think alts are decent here as well if you want to maybe climb the ladder. West Virginia has the 2nd worst explosive pass defense metric in the entire country. And this Iowa State passing game is explosive. That's what they do. They want to chuck this ball down the field. We saw Rocco Becht took the top off the Iowa defense on the road. He passed for 272 in that game. What's he going to do with this West VOD defense, especially in a game that I think is going to be a little bit more pointsy based on my handicap from last week? But Iowa State, they haven't had to do much. 26 in EPA per pass, 22nd in tackles for loss allowed. So they're moving the ball down the field with ease. The running game has been a little bit more shaky with Abu Sama banged up, phased out, whatever you want to call it. I think Becht passing yards is a great look here. This is probably my favorite bet on the board. So Rocco Becht over 243.5. I think anything below 250.5 is good. An under. Jaden Blue under. I got 64.5. I think I saw 61.5 this morning. Anything above 60.5 is good. This is a play on roll more than anything, and that's taking Jaden Blue under his rush yards. Sark didn't really commit to him as the RB1. We've seen Wisner get more run as the season has gone on. And if Jaden Blue is not going to get 15 carries, at least 12 carries, then it's going to be tough for him to get over this mark against an OU rush defense that, where are they at here? OU's rush defense, 5th in yards per carry this season. I think that this game is going to revolve around more of the passing game with Quinn Ewers coming back. I'm a little concerned that Jaden Blue, who you look at these game logs, where's the expectation he's getting into the 60s? 11 for 57 against Colorado State, 9 for 22 against Michigan, 25 for 124 against ULM, so credit there, 6 for 35 against Miss State. That does not sound like a guy who's getting the ball 15 times, picking up 70 yards. Just it sounds like his role is only getting further diminished in as the season goes on, and it seems like it's going to be more of a timeshare here. Blue, he also had an ankle injury, obviously had the bye to recover, but Sark was very non-committal in his press conference that he was going to be the RB1, clear RB1, I should say. So if it's going to be a timeshare, this number needs to be closer into the 40s. Next up, LSU, Ole Miss. Spoke about with Nick. I was concerned about this Ole Miss defense and what's going to happen when they face an offense with a pulse. They haven't faced one all year. They're off 2 physical games against physical defenses in Kentucky and South Carolina. Now you go on the road to Death Valley to face a loaded LSU offense. Nussmeier over passing yards if it's below 300. Lacey over receiving yards in the low 70s. That's Kyron Lacey. I think that this game it's a high total, and the total's been getting bet down, but it's still a high total into the 60s right now. And I think that this is going to be one where an Ole Miss team on fumes gets tested a little bit more. Lacey, a little boom or bust in terms of productions, has a relatively high floor into the 60s, I'd say. But I think in a game off a bye, Daniels banged up, I think a potentially plus matchup in the passing game. I think we could see Lacey break into the 80s here, maybe even above that. Lacey has at least 7 targets in every game, has gone to 60 yards or more in 4 of the 5 games, over 90 in 2 of those. I just think it's a usage thing, and I think this is a game, an all-out game from the LSU offense here, where we see Nussmeier chucking around the yard, we see Lacey get involved. And again, this Ole Miss defense looks loaded, but they haven't faced a passing game that's inside the top half of the country nationally in terms of EPA per pass. What's going to happen when you get the Nuss bus in the LSU offense? Nussmeier's passed for at least 285 yards in all 5 games this season, and the only time he went below that was when he got to 285 against the elite South Carolina team on the road. I'm a little shaky on this Ole Miss team. I think they're coming in on fumes. I like Nussmeier over, and I mentioned I like the Lacey over as well. That's low 70s and high 290s, we'll call it, in terms of ranges, because I know these get a little shaky as the week goes on. All right, one more add to the card and a round robin, and it's part of the round robin. So we'll start there. Last week, what was last week? Last week, Hawaii didn't get there. Stanford was a bad ad by me. That was a bad one. Other 2 got home. And then, what was the 5th one? Can't remember anymore. Anyway, round robin. This might be the last one of the season, just given the big dogs just aren't appearing anymore. This is going to be call it a baby one. A lot of like smallish underdogs. They all follow a theme, though. It's home underdogs, and for the most part, really good situational spots that I think lead to potentially more variance, not necessarily the point spread necessarily making a difference in here, but there's a chance that you're catching maybe the favored team in an unadvantageous situation in a few cases. So let's start with Rice. I played Rice +5. Still get that. That's in the market. I don't understand this number whatsoever. Could not tell you. I make Rice a small favorite in this game, and maybe it's my numbers not getting to the fact that Rice is absolutely dog water. But isn't UTSA also dog water? Like where is the respect for the road runners that they're laying points against Rice? Both teams off a bye. Both teams have played like shit all year long. I think there's plenty of variance that Rice could come out here and be the better team. If we're talking, okay, where is the one thing I can rely on? It's Rice's offense. EJ Warner, maybe this kid just isn't very good, but I'll believe for a week when I'm catching him at +170. The Rice offense it's a bit of strength on strength, but give me the offense that's 6th in EPA per rush at home against the team that's 2nd in EPA per rush on defense in UTSA. You look at the other side of the ball, Rice, 44th in EPA per pass. UTSA is outside the top 100 and everything on offense. They have no idea what they want to do. So I think that we're getting a huge discount on Rice, and there's a chance that there's no way of knowing who the better team is here, given what we've seen from both. Both teams have a special teams. Both teams are solid on special teams, but both offensive lines have struggled all year long. I can't really get to this number whatsoever. So I think there's enough variance in this one. I make Rice a small favorite, a running dog particularly. So I like Rice for sure as the first add to the round robin. The next one, let's go back to Friday night and talk Arizona State. Did the whole spiel with them. If it's actually going to be rising, this number is going to close closer to a pick 'em. So I'll give it out on Thursday. I think Arizona State, you want to go back and hear the full handicap, go back and listen my Nick towards the end of the podcast. But this Arizona State defense is legit. This Arizona State defense is what I honestly can rely on more than anything. Team can shut down the run. Going through their rushing numbers, Arizona State checks in 11th in EPA per rush, 37th in sacks, overall 23rd in yards per play. We're sure Utah is going to travel to the heat of Tempe and get a win there. I know it's Arizona State on a short week, of taxing game against Kansas, so maybe that's what steers this off. But I just don't know where we're seeing Utah getting margin here and even winning the game. That win against Oklahoma State is aging like aged milk. That I wouldn't even say that's an impressive win anymore. Then you look, they get smoked by Arizona, which might be a shady look now. This Arizona State team is trending up, and they have way more answers, way more diversity on offense. I think Sam Levitt's been solid, moving the ball. Cam Scatabo, of course, at running back. This might be a tough look here for Utah. I know off the bye makes this a little tricky, but I'm going to take the shot here on Arizona State. I really like them. Next up, kind of alluded to this one earlier in the show, Colorado. I'm not sure the difference between these two teams is that Kansas State should be laying points on the road. Avery Johnson has struggled all year long, especially in negative game scripts, especially when he needs to throw the ball and he needs to make plays. This is a guy who he wants to run. He wants to use his legs as his biggest weapon. Overall, 4 big-time throws to 6 turnover-worthy plays. I'm not sure I trust Kansas State going on the road, especially when you look at the last time they went on the road. Things went south real fast for them against BYU, where they just got ran off the field. Talent-wise, Colorado's definitely the better team here. Just pure talent on paper. We'll see if Dion could check into it one more time and get this one home. So Colorado is the third ad. Fourth, UCLA, Minnesota. I mentioned this one. I just think you're getting Minnesota at its highest, and I still think this team isn't very good. I don't think UCLA is doing much. I don't think they're going bowling this year. But I think with the idea of Garbers potentially coming back, the defense has actually held up pretty nicely, I would say, all things considered. You look at their schedule and who they've had to play, they have been up against it. And the defense has actually been okay. 29th in EPA per rush. They really haven't allowed any explosive plays. So the home team, I don't really think much of this Minnesota offense whatsoever. And you think about the other side of it, UCLA might be able to run this pretty well here. Minnesota's rush defense still shaky, checking 68th in EPA per rush, 71st in rush yards per play. They haven't played a murderer's row of offenses, and you think, well, they played USC. There were 30-mile-an-hour wind gusts in that game. USC couldn't move the ball the way they wanted to. UCLA doesn't want to do that. To me, Minnesota's a team you want as that underdog role, running dog. The total of 40, I can't trust Minnesota to hold up its end of the bargain. I think UCLA is a super live underdog here at home. You're getting Minnesota off that emotional win. Meanwhile, UCLA, they get their teeth kicked in again with a backup quarterback in. Potentially getting the starter back. Again, low total. I think UCLA can maybe play keep away here and get a win. And you look at what UCLA, you could make a case, has had like the hardest schedule in the entire country now. I know they might be running on fumes, but coming home, I think they could potentially get a win. And last up, I gotta play it. LSU money line against Ole Miss, going against Nick and all his models that went 24-1 in the night slate. But I just think the situation here is too good for LSU not to get a win. Night game, Death Valley. I think this Ole Miss team is on fumes, how this game sets up. And even going back to the Minnesota game, Minnesota hasn't had a bye week, to my knowledge, yet. So some of these teams just limping in. And I think Ole Miss in one of those body blows against Kentucky with the loss. Then you come back, body blows against South Carolina. Now you got to go play a up-tempo, explosive LSU team on the road. I could just see that one getting away from them and LSU getting the win there. So it's not it's not going to pay for any bachelor parties or early retirements, but that's a 5-team underdog round robin for you. And then the other ads I've made to the card this week: Fresno +3.5, Rice +5. Sorry. And yeah, there's a handful of stuff for you, some injury notes to look at, some player props to get ready for you, and an underdog round robin. So big thanks to all that have listened. Really appreciate all the support this season. It's been great. Next week, back in your podcast feed, Tuesday morning, we're going to recap this chaotic week. That is week 7, and we're going to talk what I think is potentially an even better slate in week 8. Enjoy the games this weekend. We'll talk to you next week.